Shall we go ahead and get started? Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning, where the sun is shining in San Antonio, but Ellen said it's 6 degrees in Chicago. So thanks for joining us today as we kick off this buy local initiative. So as some of y'all remember, back in November, we had the Mayor's Proclamation celebrating buy local season and the importance of buying local in our community. And while it's not always the holiday season, it needs to be buy local season. We are excited to kick off this initiative to review our current efforts into buy local and really look towards where should we be as a community, understanding that our small businesses have been hammered and there's a huge opportunity now to kind of undertake this work. So most of y'all know me. So my name's Anna Bradshaw. I'm an assistant director here in economic development. And I lead our small business team. And I guess before we go any further, I want to introduce the consultants we're going to be working with on this project. So we have Jamie Haley of Jamie Haley Consulting and Ellen Shepard from Community Allies. And some of y'all will recognize Ellen for her work on the ecosystem project, which is still ongoing. And in a lot of ways, these connect together. But we're excited to have Jamie on board, bringing in her experience. So I'm going to turn it over to them for some introductions.
Okay, well, I'll start. First of all, Ellen and I are very excited to be working with the city of San Antonio and this group of small business development experts that are here with us today, and the initiative that the city has taken in supporting their local businesses and their community. So I've spent the last 16 plus years doing local economy work. And prior to that, I was a small business owner. And in 2006, I co-founded a grassroots organization called Low Country Local First here in Charleston, South Carolina, which I ran until the end of 2020. I grew that business organization to support over 500 local businesses through advocacy, entrepreneurial support, co-working, incubation. And since then, I've had the opportunity to use the knowledge and the skills that I gained to support other organizations and businesses through organizational development, fundraising, and public-private partnerships. So Ellen and I go way back in doing sort of local economy and local first work. And I'm excited to work with her on this project, and I'll let her talk a little bit about who she is and what she does.
Thanks, Jamie. Yes, many of you recognize me from the ecosystem work, and it's nice to have this sort of carryover where these two projects are working together. My name is Ellen Shepard. I am the CEO and founder of a consultancy called Community Allies that is based in Chicago but works all over the country. Community Allies works at the intersection of economic development, empowering community engagement, and also strong business support organizations. We work in those three buckets. But for many years before I founded Community Allies, I was the head executive director of a neighborhood-based economic development organization in Chicago. And we were one of the pioneers of the buy local movement. And we'll talk more about that work a little bit later in this presentation. But very much like Jamie, I took a very small organization and grew it, and the neighborhood grew with me and with the organization. We'll talk more about those efforts in a bit. So I'm going to turn it back over to Anna for some introductions.
Great. So since there's just a few of us on the call today, I thought it would be good to go around and introduce yourselves, your name, your organization. And the question of the day is, what does local mean to you? So I'm just going to go down the list of participants that I see. So we'll start with Bobby.
Hello, good morning. Bobby Rodriguez. I'm with the South San Antonio Chamber of Commerce. Recently also, we've merged the West San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, so representing both chambers. And local means the neighborhood, you know, where we're from and what we're doing.
Awesome. Next, I think it's Al.
Yes, good morning. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Yeah, my name is Al Palgado, and I'm the Assistant VP for Small Business here at UTSA. And I also manage a network of small business development centers throughout South and West Texas, covering the major cities like El Paso, San Angelo, Austin here, Victoria, Corpus Christi, Eagle Pass, Alpine, and then down in the valley in Laredo. So we have been in the SBDC business for almost 38 years, 40 years if I go back and check. So buy local means a lot to us in that we try to help our small business clients grow their business, and obviously marketing, understanding their customer is very important. So we very, very excited about participating in this project.
Great to have you, Al. Next, we'll go with Kaylee.
Hi everyone, my name is Cynthia Delucca. Like I said earlier, I'm filling in for my boss, Sarah Esserlew, who is the Economic Development Director at Centro San Antonio. We primarily serve downtown San Antonio, specifically within the Public Improvement District. Economic development here is really new. This department was born out of the pandemic, and so we're exploring small business support strategies, how we can do outreach and encourage people to come back out downtown, activate downtown. So within the context of Centro, local really means hyper local and supporting micro businesses that are within the downtown economic region.
Lila.
I'm Lila Powell. I'm the executive director of the local office of LISC. And LISC is a national organization that works with business development organizations. We're not a direct service provider, but we support the nonprofit groups that do this work. And so that's what LISC is doing in San Antonio. We have a new network of place-based business development organizations. And so to me, local is designed, developed, produced, sold in those neighborhoods that we're supporting.
Margaret.
Good morning. I'm Margaret Wilson Analia. I'm the director of the Women's Business Center, Lipon Women's Business Center. Our primary focus is women and underserved entrepreneurs who want to grow their business here, create their business, scale up their business in San Antonio. For us, what local means is not only are you buying local, but you're growing the product, you're creating the product local to actually sell it. And if you're creating that product and actually producing that product locally, you're building your community and you're building your economic development strongly in your community.
Olympia.
I think Juanita just joined. I don't know if she wants to go, and then I could pop in.
Good morning. Yes, this is Juanita. I just joined. Thank you.
So Juanita, what does local mean to you? That's our question of the day.
Oh, wonderful. Local means reviving our economy, supporting your next door neighbor who may have a business, whether it's a brick and mortar or home base, just as long as that we know that our small businesses can depend on each other as their primary first before we move outside the city or even online. Buying local will not only strengthen our community, but our families and our relationships.
All right. Olympia, you want to go now?
So for me, local is a lot of kind of what Margaret touched on, just keeping things here, making it San Antonio grown. There's a lot of, fruterias and just small little merchants that we can support every day, from the fruit that we buy to, where we go get our haircut, or if we get our nails done, or who we hire to, do our lawn services. I think really local can be everywhere, and it starts with growing and producing locally, and then continuing to sustain that by supporting and giving our dollars to local businesses. I think we may have Miss Ryan.
Yeah, no problem. was a really dynamic question. I like it. So Ryan Saltz, I'm the director of Launch SA. Glad that I'm last, I guess, because I got a chance to think about this. I feel like for me, the definition of local is about seeing the majority of the proceeds or revenues return to the local area. So I think that it doesn't necessarily have to be made here, but if the business is benefiting the city and the employees and the local atmosphere, then I think it should be supported in that way. Because I think as long as we're seeing the return of capital invested in our community, then I think that that represents local to me. That's my thought.
All right. Thank y'all again, and thank you for being here today. I'm going to turn it back over to Jamie, who's going to talk about, well, we talk about what is local, why local.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good. I think when you're convening a group of individuals to talk about why you're here and why should you even care about local? And I don't think I need to. Obviously, I don't need to tell you all why you care about local, because you get it. And I don't think that there's too much we're going to say today that's going to be new to you, besides some facts, some figures, and maybe some examples. But you know, Ellen's going to talk a little bit more about sort of why it's good for the local economy and the multiplier effect of supporting local businesses. But also, you know, it really helps to create a more diverse economy, you know, sort of rather than being reliant on one big industry, your economy is more diverse, which then makes it more resilient. And it creates a more diverse array of jobs and opportunities for more people. You know, it provides opportunities for individuals to create generational wealth for their families. Whether it's because they're starting a business or an entrepreneurial endeavor, or they're carrying on a family legacy. And and it's also, you know, like I said, it's make your economy and your community more resilient, that are able to withstand economic downturns when you aren't reliant so much on outside sources. I think that's you know, right now, as we've been going through the pandemic and we've seen what's happened with supply chain issues, right? If you can source more things that are made locally, and that is just one element of local, but if you can source more things locally, you're less reliant on those supply chain issues and able to withstand something like what we're experiencing now. And then so many of you touched on this. I was trying to write down what everybody was saying, and a lot of people talked about, you know, their neighborhood and their community. And it really does help preserve and celebrate the local culture of the things that make San Antonio unlike any other place. And I think that's what Ellen and I are excited to work with you all on. So, Ellen, I'm going to hand it over to you and let you talk about a little bit about the economic side of things.
Fabulous. Thank you, Jamie. Yeah, it's fun to kind of get into the numbers about this. And can everybody see the slides right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I mentioned that I had been the executive director of an organization in Chicago, and it was in a neighborhood called Andersonville. And we did this study, and this is from 2004, so it's been a while, but the numbers are still super valid, supported by other studies that have happened since. And the study was about what happens when you spend $100 at a local business versus a non-local business. And what our study showed was that when you spend that $100 at a local business, $68 stays and recirculates, as Ryan was talking about. It bounces around in the local economy. And that's because local businesses are making purchases from other local businesses. So it's impacting their ability to buy and to pay people and to continue to support the local economy through them. Local businesses are paying local taxes on a much greater rate than non-local businesses that aren't headquartered in your place. Local businesses are paying wages to their employees, and then they're buying things from within the local economy. And we also found that local businesses give donations to local charities at a much higher rate than non-local businesses do. And this difference ended up being about a 58% difference between the amount of money that stays and recirculates when it's spent at a local business versus a non-local business. And if you look at this, if we're thinking about this as economic development people and thinking, well, if we have this plot of land and we're going to either try to build from within and situate local businesses here versus trying to attract non-local businesses, when you look at it per square foot, the difference is even greater because local businesses tend to operate in a much more efficient way. Much more of their square footage is put towards sales. So if you're looking at it on a square foot basis, it's about a 70% difference in terms of the amount of money that stays and bounces around in the local economy. As I said, this was in 2004. There have been subsequent studies that have shown that local businesses recirculate as much as 4 times as much money in the local economy than non-local stores do. And the difference is even greater if you're thinking about shopping on the internet versus buying at a local store, right? Because that internet store has no local footprint, no local employees. And when I give these presentations about local economies, often people will say, well, what about good local businesses like a Starbucks? And there is, there are gradations for sure. Starbucks pays employees health care. They're not generally in the business of begging for economic development subsidies to open, and so that's all good. And Starbucks and independent businesses, local businesses, both create local jobs. But with Starbucks, there's no economic multiplier, right? If there's no secondary jobs, there's no tertiary jobs. 30,000 Starbucks across the country still means there's one accounting firm and one graphic designer, and it's not in your town where that Starbucks is. So it's nice to think about. We talk about shopping local first, making that choice of local first, realizing that there are gradations and that that's okay. We don't need to make this completely black and white. And I will turn it back over to Jamie to talk about some of her work in Charleston.
So we wanted to show you some examples of some other cities to maybe spur your thoughts on what local first initiatives can do. And obviously the one that is nearest and dearest to me is the one that I started, which is Low Country Local First. And I thought I would just show you sort of some of the branding that we use, the hierarchy of logos. You can see the badge there that we have, that we created, that is for the businesses to use as a decal, on their windows to identify themselves as a local independent business. We have criteria around what qualifies as a local independent business, meaning that they had to be headquartered within the Low Country, which is an 8-county region. They had to have 50% or more of their ownership within that area. They had to be able to make all of their own marketing, branding decisions themselves so that they could have a unique look, as well as be able to have an impact on that multiplier effect that Ellen was just talking about. And the other was that they were privately held and not publicly traded. But we started the organization in 2006, I think, as I said earlier, to advocate for local independent businesses and to fill the gaps in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. There really wasn't anybody who was representing these businesses. And then we sort of served as an incubator to fill the gaps in that ecosystem. And sometimes when we would start programs, we held on to them, and at other times we would hand them off to other entities to then run. But in general, at Low Country Local First, we educated the general public on why it was important to choose local and influence them to do so. We worked with our elected officials and decision makers and opinion leaders to foster a better environment for creating and sustaining local businesses. And then we deliver resources, programming, networking, mentorship, et cetera, to local independent businesses of all shapes and sizes. So we thought we'd show you some examples from other places. These are, the next slide, Ellen, these are some of the things that we have done over the years. We have buy local season. We started off as a buy local month, and then our merchants really wanted us to make it a longer period of time. And because this is the time when so many of these businesses do the majority of their sales. So, this is just sort of you can kind of see some of the different things that we did. The language that we typically refer to when we talk about these campaigns are local first campaigns, but we use different language depending on the time. And you can see, like in 2020, when it was an election year, we wanted to do this fun, like vote for mom and pop, because we felt like, well, this is something that everybody can get around. And we made like, the campaign yard signs, and people put them in their yards or in front of their businesses. And then this last year they did Buy Local Feel Good, because we really wanted people to think about what it means when they support a local business, particularly during this really difficult time of the pandemic, when these businesses are really struggling. These are just, some of ours. You can see where we've worked with the cities to do banners. That's kind of up in the right-hand corner, or on my screen, it's the right-hand corner. And when we would do those, we have a lot of small municipalities that we work with in our area. And so we would give each municipality had their own sort of color that they would use for their area. So we have an area called Mount Pleasant, and they had, I think, green, and then North Charleston had another color, and Somerville had another color, so that they could sort of differentiate themselves as well. So we've got Shop and Dine Local, we've got Vote for Mom and Pop, we have Buy Local, we have Buy Local Feel Good. And then if you go to the next slide, Ellen can show you some of the other ones. So these are not just from Charleston. The one on the top that was one that we did during Valentine's Day, Love Local. We talk a lot about putting your, investing with your dollars and the type of community that you want to live in. I've also always really loved the campaigns that Asheville has done. I think Local is the New Black was sort of the first one that they did. And then the Love Asheville, Go Local, they have basically a local coupon book that they sell, and strangely enough, a coupon book. I think it's a card now, not really a coupon book, but the funds that they raise from that go to help support their local schools. So they don't necessarily run as a business support organization, but more as a campaign and marketing endeavor. And then, think of Local First DC. DC's locals mean business. It's got a completely different feel to it. And then you can see Spokane, Washington's up in the upper right-hand corner, and then New Orleans Stay Local with the arrow down at the bottom middle. So, I think, every community is going to sort of adopt the language that most resonates with them. And I would just say that that language can change, right? So it can change depending on the circumstances, on what the economic outlook for your area is, and what really resonates with different residents within your community as well. So Ellen, are we still planning to show that video, or?
Yeah, we can. You want me to bring that up?
Yeah, why don't we do that before I talk a little bit about policy? Okay. So here's a video that we did during the pandemic. We did a lot of different messaging and campaigns to try to get people to think about supporting their local businesses, particularly when so many of them were having to close. And we made a lot of efforts in terms of trying to make sure that people knew how to support those businesses, even if they weren't able to be open full time, whether it's because they were a restaurant and doing deliveries, or they were a store and doing curbside, or businesses that could offer their services virtually. But this was this video that Ellen's pulling up. That's not that. It's the Every Dollar Matters one.
Yeah, no, I'm having trouble, not with, I have the video up, I'm just having trouble doing the screen share to it. Okay, let's see if that works. There we go.
Dear Low Country,
Dear Low Country,
dear Low Country, you must be one of the most beautiful places.
salt marshes, an open sky.
The cobblestone alleys and small cafes. But I know your secret. It lies in the people. Warm and strong, compassionate and resilient.
People who care about really living.
They do what they love with excellence.
Uh-oh, lost her sound.
Endless, tasting, they
Reading, thinking, serving, caring, dancing, and laughing.
But the unexpected has come, and the weight of the unknown grows heavy.
You have been forced to move slower and more cautiously, learning new rhythms and ways to keep your loved ones safe. But remember, Low Country,
We are in this together.
we always have been. Now more than ever, we need each other. Our local businesses are the heart of our community.
We are the flavor and style only the Low Country can bring.
Every day we cast ballots with our dollars for the future of the Low Country.
Supporting the businesses on our street corners.
Remember what we learned. Remember we and not I.
Tomorrow is brighter with everyone in it.
And every dollar matters.
So we could send that link out. Obviously, it had some glitches there in the sound. But, you know, that's one I'm really proud of. I think it really resonated with people. We talk a lot about building the relationship economy. And just from what, you know, I've heard from you all and things that I have learned just from working with Anna and Olympia, it seems like that language would resonate with you all as well. We've also done a video in the past called Relationships Matter, and it kind of shows how that, you know, one business is then supporting the other. It starts with a restaurant and kind of goes through the different entities that restaurant supports, and then how all of those businesses are then invested in each other's success. And so that's kind of what we're trying to relay in those videos, and we share those, you know, on our website and via social media. But you know, the other piece of the work is certainly policy, right? Because you can talk about you know, sort of saving the fish or feeding the fish, but if you don't change the groundwater, it doesn't make as much of a difference, right? So we really need to try to change the groundwater as well. And I know Ellen's working on getting the next slide up, and that's okay. So here's one of the things that we did. You know, Michigan started at Grand Rapids, Michigan in 2009. They conducted a study with a group called Civic Economics that, boy, you know, so many of the local first organizations were excited about, and we used these numbers and talked about them a lot. And these are the numbers from Kent County in Michigan. And it showed that with just a 10% shift in spending to local businesses, and not just by consumers, but also from government agencies and anchor institutions and business to business, that Kent County could create 1,614 new jobs, 137.3 million in new economic activity, and 53.3 million in new wages. So we took those numbers and we showed what those numbers could do for the state of South Carolina. And it was 12,000 new jobs, $1 billion in new economic activity, and 375 million in new wages. And we did a lot of presentations with our Council of Governments, with our the different city councils at the state level to talk about this and to talk about the importance of supporting these businesses and what this could do without costing a single tax dollar, right? With just a simple, mindful effort to change the way your spending patterns are in order to support local businesses. In San Antonio, the city of San Antonio has done this, and they're measuring the impact of that, which I think is fantastic and goes to show their commitment to supporting these businesses. We worked after this, we worked with the city of Charleston to also incorporate a local preference option. Another thing that we did was a formula business district. San Francisco started that. And that's another policy that just really kind of helps stop the proliferation of chains. So, you have the right to create, it's a zoning ordinance, and you can write the zoning ordinance however you see fit. For us, it was, if a business had more than 10 locations and they all looked exactly the same, then that would be considered a formula business. But you could say we're going to do this for, say retail and restaurants, but we're not going to include banks and grocery stores, so that those businesses that the community knows that they really need to try to attract, like my community really needs to try to attract a grocery store. And so if we put a policy like that in place that would eliminate the possibility of a grocery store coming in, our community would certainly not support that. So those are just a couple of examples of policies that can be put in place that really help to leverage that support of local businesses beyond sort of the marketing and the advocacy efforts that are so important. And I think those marketing and advocacy efforts are important in order to make people understand why they should care. And then once they understand why they should care, then it's a lot easier to put the policies in place. So I'm going to let Ellen sort of take it from here and talk some more about the great work that she did in Andersonville.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. And I apologize for the sound. I'm super familiar with Zoom, but not that familiar with WebEx. So I wasn't able to put those settings in place to make sure you could all hear okay. But when Jamie talks about this idea of getting the data in place and doing the public relations part so that you can change the policy, that's very much what we did in Andersonville. So just to give you a really quick introduction, Andersonville, as I said, is a neighborhood within the city of Chicago. It's on the north side. It was founded in the late 1800s by Swedish immigrants. And it has this deep history of support of locally owned businesses dating back to the 1960s, when the guy on the left, this Viking, is a guy named Kurt Mathiasen, who was known as the mayor of Andersonville. And he organized the local business owners to fight the impacts of urban flight in the late 60s, that, everybody was leaving the cities to go out to the suburbs. And he got the business owners together, and they decided to brand and market the neighborhood based on the local culture. So they started branding the neighborhood as this kind of Swedish haven. And he also got the business owners together to really take care of the place. So every Saturday morning, Kurt would put on his Viking horns, and he'd get his Swedish flag, and he'd get the sign you see that says cleanup time. And he'd walk up and down the streets ringing a bell, and the store owners would come out and sweep the front of their stores. And it really, they got the street swept, but it also called to mind how important localness is and people who actually care about the place that they live. By the time I moved there, there had been some pretty significant periods of disrepair, but there was still this tight-knit business community, and all of the businesses were locally owned because the chains did not yet see the area as a good investment. Andersonville then started entering sort of the typical phases of gentrification, where there were a group of artists who thought, hey, cheap, great housing and cool, funky little shops, and they started to move in. And then it was flooded by a lot of other young folks, including, and people with money, including chain stores. And by the time I was the head of the Economic Development Agency in Andersonville, we had to start to think about what would it mean if these local businesses went away, if they got turned into a bunch of chain stores instead. And because we were an economic development agency, we wanted data. And so that's when we did the multiplier study that I showed you in the beginning of this presentation to see what happens in terms of our local economy if these local businesses are no longer here. Because we had the data, we were then able to talk to our policymakers, talk to our neighbors, really importantly, talk to our landlords about the importance of these local businesses. And we began to ground this community both in its Swedish heritage, but also in the new cultures that were beginning to come. And then in addition, in this idea of how important localness was and how important neighborhoods, the neighbors are and the relationships that they build. So I was thrilled about 10 years ago, one of the major local papers called Andersonville the shop local capital of Chicago. So it told me we are not only being recognized by this locally, but also throughout the city. Everywhere you go in Andersonville, you'll see little signs like the one in the upper right here that says, thanks for shopping local. When I was there, you almost never heard or saw the word Andersonville without the word local next to it. So we just constantly ground it in. And every 2 years, we would survey our local residents. People were engaged, and so we would get a couple thousand people who responded in a neighborhood of maybe like 28,000, which is pretty great. And the last one that I was there for, 93% of people who responded said that local ownership of business was very important when deciding whether to shop or dine in Andersonville. Last year in 2021, Time Out magazine called Andersonville the coolest neighborhood in the United States, and it was called the second coolest neighborhood in the world behind some neighborhood in Copenhagen. So one of the things that was important about this local campaign was, as you might imagine, as I know has happened in San Antonio, once this stuff starts to happen, the neighborhood becomes unaffordable and the local businesses stop being able to afford to stay. So one of the most important things that we were able to do was to sit down with the landlords. And luckily, at least when I first was in Andersonville, the landlords, the building ownership was actually very local too. So we could call them on the phone and show them our market data, show them how important local ownership was to the people who were shopping there, and talk to them about their investment in this neighborhood, and that if the neighborhood changed, that their investment was likely to tank. And luckily, we could also point to other neighborhoods that had allowed the flip to chain stores to happen, and now were filled with vacancies every time there was an economic downturn or when there was a pandemic. I know that during the economic downturn in 2008, during the pandemic, people would come to the store owners and say, if I can't buy it locally, I'm just not going to shop anywhere right now. So there was that kind of dedication because of the culture that we had built. We also wanted to show you some work from Local First Arizona. So this is our colleague Kimber, who's based in Phoenix, but works statewide. And she's built this huge statewide Local First coalition. Because there was a dearth of just business support services in Phoenix especially, but also statewide, they became a full service business development organization. So they offer one-on-one counseling. They have like accelerator kinds of services. They're a full service business coalition with events and all sorts of resources to help businesses get and stay competitive. But they've also expanded into some other areas, thinking about things like, well, localness also applies to the architecture. So they've gotten involved in historic preservation efforts to make sure that their local culture and their local architecture is sustained. And then one of the cool things that they've done with Local First Arizona that I think has wonderful resonance for San Antonio is they started a campaign completely geared to the Hispanic community that they call Fuerza Local. And it started as a marketing campaign, much like the campaigns that Jamie showed you from other cities, where they, but geared to the local culture and coming from people who also were from that culture and who spoke that language as their native language. And they were able to start to talk to young people about the importance of supporting the ma and pa stores, because the young people were beginning to have a culture of, you know, those ma and pa stores are what my parents did and what my grandparents did. But they were able to build some momentum around this idea of, no, this is your history, this is your culture, this is your city, this is your family. Fuerza Local has also begun a really powerful small business incubator among the local Hispanic community, where they have classes of folks go through, and there's a community of practice so that they're providing each other with peer support. And they've graduated, gosh, I think over 1,000 business owners that have come through this program, and then they track the metrics really carefully to see how people are doing so that they can tweak their efforts. We also wanted to talk about, in Local First Arizona, they were able to get some amazing policy changes made, including, this was a study that they did comparing the money that the state, no, it was the city of Arizona was spending to buy office supplies. And what they discovered was that the Arizona was buying office supplies from like Office Max or Office Depot, but there was a local office supply store that had the capacity to provide them with everything they needed. But just out of habit, they went to the non-local. And in the study, they looked at the difference in the money that went back out of the state because they hadn't done that local shopping. And they found that the money that went out of the state more than equaled whatever money the state would have saved by maybe getting slightly better prices through Office Max. If they had shopped locally, the economic multiplier would have been much, much, much greater. And because of that, the city of Phoenix created a really robust local purchasing policy, where not only are they giving preference to local businesses and giving them like percentage differences in terms of their whatever they bid, but they also maintain a database of local businesses, and every purchase, I think it's of under $50,000, has to go through the local database of local businesses first. And if there's no local business then that can supply it, then they'll start to look outside. Jamie, do you want to talk a little bit about San Antonio and what we saw about this campaign?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you guys are all aware of what your city did in creating a buy local campaign before the holidays. And Anna or Olympia, feel free to jump in here, but I think it's certainly worth recognizing and applauding the efforts and the work that you guys did on trying to rally the community around supporting these businesses, particularly during the pandemic and particularly during the holidays. And the fact that that the mayor of San Antonio did a proclamation for buy local season, and publicly asked people to shift a portion of their shopping to locally owned businesses. I think it's really great that and you know, I don't know if you all realize how special it is that the city is so supportive of this effort. We've had our mayors do proclamations before, but we've never had them take the initiative to do a proclamation, nor did they ever take an initiative to support local businesses. It was always something that that we had to advocate for on behalf of those businesses. And you know, from my view from South Carolina, it looks like this campaign had a pretty significant presence. Anna, do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. So, you know, I guess from our point of view, we couldn't sit by and not do anything. So we wanted to, shine a light on our local industries. And a lot of the feedback we've been hearing from council members was, our small businesses are hurting and we need to do something. And so we said, well, let's do something. And this was us, trying to rally together, bringing in small business owners to be present at council, to just really put a face to small businesses, running the ad campaign, both on, traditional and social media, to put it out there and hopefully generate some energy, knowing that we wanted to undertake this study. So I think it puts us in a good position right now, where there's some attention paid to this and recognition that we probably can do more, and that things have changed a lot. So in the past, some of y'all are aware of the Buy Local, Grow SA initiative that the city had partnered with the Maestro Entrepreneur Center on. And that was a 2-year engagement that's wrapped up. And I think there's a lot to be learned from what was positive about that. But, given the shift over the last few years, how can we adapt and meet the needs that are out there now, and bringing in the component of the multiplier study? What is that economic impact? It's not just about the feel-good component, although it's great, but also what does it mean for our economy and being sustainable moving forward? You hear a lot of the word recovery and resiliency. So how do we help our small businesses recover, but also grow that more resilient ecosystem, so that, we're in a better position if something like this were ever happen again?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I kind of wanted to talk to you about the project scope and what we're working on now, and what we're going to be working on in ideally a phase 2. And I was just looking at the chats, and I saw some questions around some of this, and hopefully this will answer some of those questions. But currently we're doing a needs assessment. Obviously, we're having this meeting. We're going to be holding 4 different focus groups with local businesses to find out sort of what resonates with them, what their challenges are, how this campaign can best support their efforts. We're doing a consumer behavior study. And Ryan, I was looking at some of the comments that you had and questions that you had in the chat. And I think that this study, as well as a multiplier study that's going to be done by Civic Economics, which is going to be very similar to the one that Ellen showed you an example of, is going to be done for San Antonio. So you all will get to see what those local dollars, how they are circulating within your community as well. And then perhaps what a 10% shift could do for your economy. And then what are the challenges, right? So I think the consumer behavior study will help us figure out what some of those challenges are. And, I see that, one of those questions is like, is it, more expensive to buy or support local businesses? Well, that's been a question that we've been asking people for years and years and years. And is that actually true, or is that just a perception? And then if so, how do we overcome that? And I jotted down a note as we're sort of developing this study that perhaps one of the questions that we need to ask is, have inflation or supply chain issues impacted your ability to support local businesses? I think that would be, we want to make sure that we're bringing forth the most relevant questions as that we are then asking the members of the community, not just the local business community. And then we'll be doing an assets assessment. What is it that makes San Antonio so different? We know that you've got a strong military presence there. There is a wonderful history that can be highlighted. The culture is fantastic. With your tourism industry, looking at those different things and seeing what assets that we can leverage to help support this campaign. And then what are the best practices? So we also want to bring forth best practices that are being used in other communities that we can share, and then make recommendations to the city and the partners in terms of the campaign and policy, and then what a financial model for sustaining this type of effort might look like. So this work will go on. We've started it, and we're planning on wrapping it up the end of May. And then ideally we'll start a second phase, which will be more of the implementation, where we're actually working with the community to design what some of these things might look like, and including, the marketing, the branding, the web, who's going to be the key partners. We hope all of you all will be partners in helping us to make sure that this effort is leveraged to its highest ability. So yeah, so we are, I think, are at the point where we're ready to open it up to discussion and questions, and I think Ellen's going to lead us through that. Ellen, I think you're muted.
Which is too bad because I was just brilliant. So, well, I noticed that there were some questions in the chat. First, let's just see, does anyone have any burning questions before we turn this over to discussion? Okay. So what are you noticing about the campaigns that we showed you in terms of what you think would be promising for San Antonio? What excites you? What do you see that you think that would work?
I can start us off.
I'm sorry, can you put back those campaigns so we can have a direct answer to you, if you don't mind?
Sure. Yeah, hang on a second.
That way it'll stimulate feedback for you.
I can start us off. This is Al. This is good, great stuff. You guys, wonderful presentation, and the approach that you're taking is very sound, and I think the implementation part of it is also very, very good. We are most interested in the business coalition side of it because, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, is that while you may have a campaign, we have to encourage the small businesses to be part of that campaign and their marketing approach, and really understand what they're trying to sell. And a lot of times when you look at supply chain issues or access to capital issues, it keeps them from really engaging sometimes. So the business coalition, I think, is so important that we encourage and engage small businesses to participate in the Buy Local campaign. They have to understand it well, how to use it, how to market it within their own businesses. And I think the business coalition side of the approach is very good, because that is also needed. That's the other side of the coin. You set the stage, the opportunity to sell both ways, obviously buy and sell, but they've got to sell, and they've got to, be encouraged to participate as well. So I like that a lot. The Arizona example is very, very good. I liked it.
Good. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, Al. I think that these initiatives tend to only be as strong as you say, the business owner buy-in, the buy-in of the local neighborhood organizations, because you don't get that like infusion of this local first culture unless everybody's really engaged. It has to be the kind of thing where everybody, if you're walking down the street somewhere, you see the stickers in the store, and as a consumer, you're sort of constantly reminded. So yes, I think one of the challenges and opportunities in starting one of these campaigns, and one of the things that we'd love all of your input on, is how do we reach those local business owners, and hopefully what support can your organizations provide to get to them, because you have the relationships.
There's a lot of things that the business organizations here in the local area in San Antonio can do by promoting the campaign through webinars, our training sessions, our contact with our businesses, not only clients, but in general, when we're trying to attract clients, we can also promote the campaign as well. So I think there's a lot of neat stuff that we can do as business service organizations here in town.
Yeah, that is music to our ears. That's
Gary said the exact same thing. Yeah, that's exactly what we need to have happen. And Al, I remember I think it was you that said something about the marketing challenges of
Right.
small businesses and considering what it is that you do. I'm sure that you know the idea of talking to businesses about how they differentiate themselves, right, is so incredibly important. You know, if you're selling widgets and somebody else is selling widgets, you know, what is it that makes you different about the widgets?
Right.
Really, it's what, not necessarily even the widgets that you're selling, but what makes you different as a business owner. And I think that that using this language and talking about their locality and what it means to them can be such a differentiator for businesses and how they market themselves.
Yeah, very simple things like e-commerce, the digital divide, the use of technology to market their companies. I mean, one little tweak can help a business really improve their sales in a very short amount of time. So it's just a lot of stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think all of that business TA that we talked about, it just hooks into this, right? As you say, Al, if a business is able to make it as easy for a consumer to shop with them as it is to click on Amazon instead, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and one last comment. One of the things that's really important to us in our business is what we call client attribution, that we survey them either in person or, you know, digitally and get their comments and ask them the questions. Did this campaign help you improve your sales? And if so, how much? And, you know, those kinds of questions to really get the feedback for that economic impact throughout the city would be very, very important. We need to see what the return on investment is with this campaign and others as well.
Right. Yeah, I think where a lot of these kinds of initiatives can fail is by not building in metrics from the start.
Right,
So that's
right.
why we're starting to talk to you. That's why we're having focus groups with the business owners. And then hopefully we can build in just throughout this campaign into perpetuity. How's it going?
Right.
What needs to be tweaked? And that asking those questions both of the business owners and also of the shoppers to see how we're doing and reaching them.
I have a thought regarding campaigns like this. So just as a consumer, right, I've walked through many smaller cities or cities that have stuff like Shop Local. And I think every time I go to another city, I'm always kind of like, I wonder what that means to them. Like, you know, the visual is obviously products, but oftentimes I think products or retail-based businesses are sort of becoming less and less, just as you know, we're not really in sort of the old town centers anymore, where you know there's a butcher and what have you, and you know you kind of know everybody that makes everything. But what we do have a predominance of is service-based businesses, and like haircut or massage or any of these types of businesses. I think at a local level, food, I think that's always fairly transparent, like, oh, that's a local place versus not a local place. But I'm wondering how we might be able to focus on those service-based businesses, because I don't think that association is often there when you think of local, right? Like, oh, I should go try this local place to get my haircut, right? And you know, there's so many of those. If you look at every retail shopping center, that I think is the primary composition of most shopping centers or service-based businesses. So that's just my 2 cents. I think if we can somehow connect that local isn't necessarily a physical product, but it may be a service, I think that would probably, and especially San Antonio, I think is a very service-based city, so would probably make a big difference.
Yeah, that's great to know about San Antonio specifically. And I think that's also why some of the local first campaigns have gone beyond just shop local and buy local to verbiage like think local and love local. And to really starting to think about this local first as more broad than just, you know, shop at your local boutique.
Yeah, I would say that for our organization, Ryan, that the majority of the businesses that were part of it were probably service-based. And you know, and you can talk about, you know, why it's important to to go to, Joe's Barbershop rather than to Supercuts, or rather to go to Susan's Accounting rather than H&R Block, right? So, those things, are important. And now so many people are getting, obviously not haircuts, but accounting services or insurance online rather than purchasing them from, the local person that they know. So I think this campaign certainly benefits them. And like Ellen said, I think it all depends on sort of the language that you use, on whether or not those businesses are going to adopt that language and use it in their own marketing.
I think your consumer behavior study will tell us a little bit about how to market this, because if we can draw, people from big box shopping at least one time, to go downtown and look for clothing items or whatever, I mean, that tells us something there. So that kind of helps us market the campaign, if you will, if we know what the consumer patterns are for, say, downtown. So that would probably be very helpful as well.
Yeah, thank you, Al.
I think really another thing about this campaign that's exciting to me is that, from my perspective, a lot of policy and other types of investment decisions that we make in San Antonio are driven by this feeling that other cities are getting ahead of us, that there's this sort of lingering feeling of it's not necessarily an inferiority complex, but just a lot of comparison to peer cities and sensitivity around our growth rate, and I think this is a wonderful antidote to that. We don't need to compare ourselves to other communities. We have wonderful resources, wonderful business, wonderful potential for organic growth in this community that doesn't depend on attracting a new national chain coffee shop. And I think that the more we can get that message out, the more we begin to make other kind of cultural changes about valuing, San Antonio's core and its history and heritage. So I'm really enthusiastic about that, not just in this realm, but in other areas of community development work. And then I think the other kind of fun thing here is that this really carries along this discussion about the shift. And I no offense to Centro, but this has certainly been surfaced by elected officials to focusing on neighborhoods. And so there's a great niche to sit down with city council people and talk with them about. It's one thing to say, okay, this is the decade of neighborhoods. It's another to really put in place policies that support the differentiation of neighborhoods and allow your neighborhood to be a place where people can have a complete experience, where they can shop for things that maybe aren't even available in some places right now, like good local produce and food at affordable prices.
Yeah, that's fabulous, Lila. I think that it's exciting to me how this work dovetails so nicely with that decade of neighborhoods. It dovetails with the local procurement that San Antonio is doing so well. And it also dovetails, Lila, you've talked a lot in the couple of years that we've worked together about that sort of inferiority complex that San Antonio can carry, especially when looking at Austin. And I would love you to be able to hold the local first work up sort of as a shield to make sure that what has happened in Austin in terms of displacement doesn't happen here in San Antonio. And the fact that Anna is involved and that the city is at the front of this means that it's not just it's not the local folks fighting City Hall. It is City Hall starting to recognize the importance of investment in these kinds of area, not just an outside attraction. So that's just super promising.
I think for me, and a couple of people have said in different ways, is about curating experiences. I think there's a lot out there, and we have to help folks connect the dots. And what, I feel like everybody kind of tries to build this comparison to the Pearl here. Well, the Pearl is an experience, and they've curated that experience for people. Come to the farmer's market, eat, walk along the river. Like it's a curated experience. So how do we look at our neighborhoods and try to curate that experience? Having unintentionally walked down that main street in Andersonville before I even knew Ellen. It was an experience as a tourist to be able to live like the locals. So how do we capitalize that and build it in different places, or also capitalize on, you know, kind of life events, whether it's, you know, you're planning a wedding or Valentine's Day or heck, even back to school. So how do we, based on people's behaviors, try and nudge those behaviors to think local? I learned last week that there are 5 certified chimney sweeps in San Antonio. And they are very proud of the fact that they are certified chimney sweeps. So this is a time of year where people are like, oh yeah, I should probably clean that thing out if I want to use it the one time it's cold.
It's me.
So, you know, how are we capitalizing on that too? The home repair going towards Ryan's point of services, or the local plumber. So I think it's really interesting just to learn what's out there, but also to then shape that and let people know and create that awareness. So it's not quite as easy to pick up, you know, to go onto Amazon or to walk into Walmart or to call Roto-Rooter and those kind of larger firms out there, but really think differently.
You know, we had a discussion years ago, and as far as I know, this has never gone forward, but it's been discussed for at least 10 or 15 years, which is reaching out to the realtor, the realty community when folks are relocating to San Antonio, or relocating to neighborhoods.
Yes.
And because if you go to Stone Oak, they're happy to show you all their floor plans. It's very predictable. It's very understandable. You know what you're getting. But if you want to look outside of those neighborhoods, there's no central source where someone can say, let me give you a flyer on the Beacon Hill neighborhood, and I realize we've got issues here around, are we promoting, you know, gentrification or other you know, negative outcomes. But I think it's also important for us to understand that, you know, the city is marketed in many different ways at many different levels that we don't tap into in an organized way, because they're not, you know, we don't have a network there. And creating information that can be given to new home buyers about what's available in their local neighborhood could be a good I mean, I'm still holding out that we'll get the other program done, but this could be something to do instead of that, or in addition to that.
And Leah, let me add to that, going back 20 years from that, kind of over 20 years ago, it's getting with the realtors and having them to look at other parts of San Antonio. That's probably like a couple-hour conversation. But let me add to that. I think one of the keys that we need to look at when we're looking at our small business and our local, what value do they bring to the table? I think that's one of the clear messages of shopping local. I love the different postage. When you support a local business, you support a little league, you support a family. I think those are continuing messages that we have. I think with San Antonio, what I love most, having, you know, from San Antonio personally, is that we have this diversity of neighborhoods and experiences that people can have. So as we're setting this up, making sure that we're not having businesses to compete against each other, or neighborhoods competing against each other. Because guess what? We all love to have multiple experiences, whether it's the Pearl or whether it's the East Side, the West Side, those different areas. So I think if we're looking at this as multiple experiences one can bring to the table, I personally would like to make sure that we not only create a short-term, but a long-term plan. As we all know, we, as an urban planner, we love to plan, but it's that implementation and it's that follow-up and it's that carry on. Because if you're coming up with a new name every year, oh yeah, that's just that one. You know, businesses aren't going to waste their time. Small businesses do not have that time to keep engaging in several different messages. You know, so we need to be very cognizant of the message that we create and the long-term value. What I love most is that the message was changing per season, like during election time, things like that. The logo and everything was the same, but the message was still. You didn't feel like you were with a new organization or a new theme this year. It was just that carryover. And I'm just kind of going through my notes. And again, I love the focus of the neighborhood. I think that's really a value that we need to bring to our community. And I think that's one of the jewels of San Antonio. Yes, we are different from Austin. We're different from Dallas and Houston, Chicago and New York. We're proud for that. And this is why we're proud. So those value added benefits that we bring to the table, we need to make sure that we communicate that. And from the business person's perspective, I think it's really important that we say this is not going to be just another campaign. There's been multiple campaigns, there's multiple organizations with Buy Local. So we need to also make sure that we're tying in to those other organizations and groups that have a Buy Local message. Not that they have to eliminate their Buy Local message, but make sure we're tying in. It's so that we're not over speaking on each other and confusing the business people that are out there, that they're feeling compelled that they have to participate with one group or another.
Margaret, and actually everyone, if there are other organizations that you know of that have a Buy Local message, if you could put them in the chat, because we want to make sure we're doing just that, you know, not overpowering something somebody else is doing, sort of resourcing what's already happening on the ground. So one of the things we wanted to do was to have an inventory of what messaging is already out there.
Okay.
If you could add those, that would be great.
Absolutely.
And I just put in the chat that I can't even remember how many years ago it was now, but we did flirt with a chain restaurant ordinance for the Riverwalk.
Could I receive the different?
I don't remember how long ago that was, but there might be some interesting kind of feedback on why that didn't go forward.
I'd be curious to see that. I have a friend who is a food writer, and she said San Antonio is one of my all-time favorite places, and I love it, and the food is great. The only thing I would recommend is the Riverwalk needs more local businesses and less chains. That's so funny. I'd be very curious.
I have another thought. You know, so I set out at the end of last year, at the beginning of this year, to walk more, and so I've been walking, call it 7 miles or so a day, and just for fun, right? And I'm in a neighborhood that's not. I mean, I remember thinking about this beforehand. I thought walking to the end of my neighborhood was ridiculous, but now I'm walking beyond that, and you know, obviously San Antonio is so car and transportation dependent that if you're going to make the trek to go somewhere to shop for anything, it's really got to be purpose driven. And if we think about food as the best example of why people go to certain areas, like, you know, you don't go to one food truck, you go to Food Truck Park maybe, or you don't go to you know, a restaurant that's an island, unless it's just happenstance the best restaurant in the world. You go to a place that has multiple options because maybe you go to drink one place, you go to eat another place, and then you go watch a show another place. But as San Antonio is, again, this big stretch, and then we also have all these shopping centers, and there's really not necessarily the greatest articulation of, you know, this shopping center is for this stuff, or, you know, it's sort of a grab bag of things. How could we I don't know, accentuate marketing for shopping centers to showcase what they have more of? Because again, most of these things are locally based businesses. Or how could we incentivize the real estate owners to better market the tenants that they have? I think too often, I mean, not too often, quite honestly, this is totally on the person that's renting the space, but it is their responsibility as the tenant to market what they do. But how could we incentivize the landlord to market more of what's going on within their shopping center to make it a destination? An example I would give is on the south side, there's a place called Pika Pika Plaza, and it's a consortium of different local businesses, almost kind of in a bazaar-like way, but very interesting experience, all local stuff. Definitely, if you go there, you get this feeling like, oh wow, I'm getting all these different things that, you know, are entrepreneurial, but also local in many different senses. They're all owned by different stuff. But that plaza itself advertises like, hey, this is the destination you want to come if you want to get this experience. So how can we maybe incentivize more of, you know, hey, this is the destination for, you know, this is the wedding, whatever center. This is the, I don't know, tax season center or something. That may be really dumb, but
No, but it gives
have
us-
so many centers.
It gives us great information, Ryan, about different communities that, that are specific to San Antonio that we need to make sure to engage. So, knowing that there's this core of shopping centers, but it's mostly locally owned businesses, that's super important to how this marketing goes out, and who needs to be at the table as we start to engage people and excite people around promoting these efforts. I see that Juanita's hand's up, and I know we're running out of time, so I want to make sure I bounce over to her. Juanita?
I wanted to reference one of the comments about, I think Lila Powell mentioned that they thought about addressing about a restaurant ordinance for the Riverwalk. So in traveling, one of the things that I really enjoy is I love speaking to people wherever I go. Actually, I'm not a shy person. And so when I introduce myself, I tell them I'm from San Antonio, Texas. And he says, "Oh my gosh, I remember the Riverwalk." I said, "Yeah, it's really beautiful." I said, "Did you know that once a year, they drain it and they clean it and there's historical things about it?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "But I really wish they had more of the local shops and restaurants and the home cooking closer to the Riverwalk." And it's been on more than one occasion that I've traveled to other cities. Like I was in Indianapolis, and I met a person who was actually eating it at the little warehouse there before I caught the flight back. And she told me, she goes, "Oh, I remember going to the Riverwalk." She said, "But I really wanted to know the more authentic food. Not that the franchise restaurants aren't good." She says, "But when I go to San Antonio, I hear about all this rich culture from multiple, countries and multiple languages. I'd love to see more of that." I said, "Well, there is. You just have to kind of research it a little bit." She says, "Yeah, but sometimes when I come into San Antonio, I need to be able to come in quick, but I might have a one-day layover, and I'd love to be able to have that more accessible." So between Indianapolis, being in California, I went to Utah. I brag about San Antonio and the changes that we're doing, especially with what the city's doing for recognition and reigniting economy. But it's always the same thing. The tourism, when they came in, they want something more authentic and more historical. And we have a lot of heritage, restaurants that really would benefit us as far as the community. So those are some of the comments I've received as I've traveled. So I don't know if that's relevant or not, but in 3 different cities that I've been to, that's been some of the conversations that I've had.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's relevant in terms of thinking about public policy and business attraction, right? Who are we attracting where, and what does that do for our local economy? How does it showcase us as a city? I think it often happens that cities will build out their city centers and then plug in a whole bunch of chain businesses into the spaces that they've just built and make it sort of reversal of how they just invested their dollars. They invest all this money and then they make it so the money flows right back out, and so that people can come to the same businesses that they'd go to if they were just in their own city. So I think those points are really important, Juanita. I know that we're running out of time, and as Jamie said earlier, we're very much you are our ears and eyes and hands and voices on the ground. And so Anna's going to leave us with talking about next steps and how we're hoping you can help connect us to some folks that we need to be talking to.
All right. And I also just wanted to give a shout out to Madi. She was able to hop on. I know she had a conflict today, but excited to continue to work with Maestro on this part of it. So, and again, we're recording this and we'll send out to the group that was invited, just so, we're all in the loop, because we definitely hope you all stay engaged through this process. It's already a great discussion to start. I'm really looking forward to this. To say, when I took this position, and I can go into my story about coffee and how I landed here, but I think Buy Local is like super cool. And this is probably one of the most exciting things like on my plate for this part of the year. So next week we will send materials for you all to promote on the focus groups that we'll be doing. It'll include email, text, social media posts in English and in Spanish. And then I know Ellen and Jamie are working with the folks out at Culture Ingua to make it accessible to their clientele as well. But please, we ask that you share it with your networks and businesses that y'all work with so we can engage them. In March, we'll be sending out survey for businesses to participate in the multiplier study. So lots of surveying going on, but again, we'll ask that y'all share that as well. Also in March, we're going to conduct a consumer survey, and we will send you information to share on that as well. So lots of things coming, and we'll try and package it all together. And then be on the lookout for future meetings this spring, as we present results, get more feedback, and really go into the design phase. That's when it's going to become more and more real. Right now, we're going to do assessing and research, but want to, look forward to that part where we'll start designing. So again, thank you for joining us. Thanks to Ellen and Jamie for kicking us off. And, if you guys hear anything or have anything to share, please feel free to share it with me, with Olympia. We want to gather that feedback too. I know it doesn't always happen when you're on a Zoom call in the moment. So if you have any thoughts or information, background you want to share, please share it with us. And Ellen, Jamie, I don't know if you have any other closing remarks.
I don't. I'm going to put my email in the chat. I don't mind if people email me if they've got questions or thoughts as well. So I'm just going to stick that in here.
All right. Then with that, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up. We'll let Jamie drop in her email. It's not there yet.
Ellen put hers in as well.
Oh, and Ellen's is there as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will give everybody back 3 minutes probably before their next meeting begins. So thank y'all. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you all for your time.
Hey, Anna, do you have a minute?